request to have a threesome is outrageous and is morally wrong. She wants to have a threesome with another woman, and you don't want to do it?
No. No. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Roland Smith in the UPN9 News studio. It is a sad and tragic day for America.
Indeed it is. I'm Brenda Blackman. The United Nations was hit by a series of terrorist attacks this morning, which left the World Trade Center destroyed and Washington under siege. The attacks began at 8:45 when a jetliner crashed into the World Trade Center. A second plane crashed into the Twin Towers about 15 minutes later. The crashes left fiery, gaping holes in the 110-story buildings.
And about an hour later after that, there was a huge explosion at the base of the South Tower. That's One World Trade Center, and part of the building collapsed. After about 20 minutes later, the second tower also collapsed in flames. About 50,000 people work in the World Trade Center, and witnesses say that they saw bodies falling from the Twin Towers and people jumping out.
People ran down the stairs in panic and fled the building. The entire area of Lower Manhattan was enveloped in smoke. President Bush called the attacks the work of terrorists and ordered a full-scale investigation to, quote, hunt down the folks who committed this act.
Officials say that one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center was an American Airlines flight. It was Flight 11 heading to L.A. that had been hijacked from Boston. Now, about an hour later, a third plane crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., in Virginia. The entire Pentagon was evacuated, and part of the Pentagon collapsed.
There was also a fire on the Washington Mall. Officials ordered the White House evacuated after the Secret Service received what it described as a credible threat that the White House would be attacked.
The Treasury and the U.S. Capitol, the State Department, were also evacuated. We were seeing just there on that video recorded earlier a plane that had flown in from the south, it looked like, and hit that second tower. At about 11 a.m., the government ordered all federal office buildings in Washington evacuated, and in Chicago. The giant Sears Tower there was also evacuated. At the World Trade Center, heavy black smoke billowed into the sky above that gaping hole in the sides of that 110-story Twin Towers. Here it is again. There's the plane coming in, Brenda. So they say it was a 767 American Airlines hijacked out of Boston heading to L.A. That's about all the information we have at the moment as to what that was. Obviously, it seems to be, and nobody is confirming it yet the President of the United States is saying it is a terrorist attack.
Now we're going to go to Washington Pictures and take a look at the Pentagon. Firefighters there, firefighters being called in from all over the country, everywhere, fighting the flames in Washington as well as here in New York City. By the way, when that second plane hit in New York, the fireball of flame and smoke that erupted, I mean, it just left originally just a gaping hole in the glass and steel tower. Look, we're seeing firefighters now coming out.
You know, in New York City, all of the kids who are in school today, because the school system started just a few days ago, are being kept in their classrooms and will stay there until parents can come and collect them. But that's all throughout New York City.
We're seeing police and emergency personnel all around the country, of course, being put on alert, as is the entire country right now, being put on terrorism alert. Look at the explosion.
That's the collapse of one of the towers. I can't tell which one it is because of the debris and smoke. This was all recorded earlier. That was the second one that collapsed. That was probably just about an hour and a half ago.
Thousands of pieces of what appeared to be office paper first came drifting. You could even see it as far away as Brooklyn, about 3 miles from the tower, and that was only in the beginning. And as you had mentioned earlier, President Bush called the attack a national tragedy and, quote, an apparent terrorist attack.
Yeah, Ira Ferber, who is a former NTSB, that's National Transportation Safety Board, he was a spokesman, discounted the likelihood of an accident, obviously. And as a result of this attack, all the bridges and tunnels between New Jersey and New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, et cetera, are closed. Air traffic halted throughout not only the New York area, but certainly nationwide about, I'd say, a half hour to an hour after the first attack.
Hospital scenes like this one, of course, being played out all around the area. people are being told if you do not have an emergency situation to just not go to the hospitals. Many schools have even become triage areas in the city. All hospitals, of course, being utilized right now. Emergency personnel needed.
We have to compliment, of course, all of our colleagues who are from other stations, both radio and television, who have been covering this since a little bit before 9 this morning. And I heard on the radio just a little bit ago, Mayor Giuliani, of course, was speaking to the media, and he was saying, if you are south of Canal Street, get out. His words, get out. Walk slowly, he said, but get out.
A tragedy, a horrible day for this area, and of course, a horrible day for the fear that has spread nationwide. And of course, you mentioned the air traffic being halted all around the country, coast to coast, no planes flying. Of course, there was a report, though, of a plane going down in Pennsylvania. Not only did we have the situations in Washington and New York, but also now in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that report was a Boeing 767, presumably, again, I want to say presumably an American Airlines plane, because they seem to have been the ones that were subjected to the attack, probably because of the name American, if in fact this is and is proven to be a terrorist attack. It went down east of, I think it's Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania. And we have no further information on that, but as soon as we get it, we will tell people. And we should tell people, Brenda, where they're watching and how they are.
Of course. Comcast of New Jersey, also on Dish Television and the Dish Network and DirecTV, because so many of the broadcast facilities have their satellite dishes atop the World Trade Center. So many places are not able to get out and get you information right now.
Back to Mayor Giuliani for a moment, a quote from him said, we sense, I'm quoting, we sense there were a tremendous number of lives lost.
The president, of course, in Florida, Mayor Giuliani, as well as Governor Pataki today in New York City. We've heard from the mayor so far and hope to hear from the governor as well. All international flights, by the way, heading to the United States have been diverted to Canada. All New York City subway lines shut down. Trading on Wall Street, of course, suspended. And we will, of course, have information about some other places as we get it. As you mentioned, with the schools, the school children are safe now at their schools, but as soon as parents come to pick them up, they can be picked up by their parents or guardians.
And I can imagine just the fear. I mean, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and so many of you out there that are joining us as we try to describe the horrific situation in New York City as well as at the Pentagon. Here's that video earlier with the plane coming into that South Tower. Watch this.
That was so incredible to watch first thing this morning.
It is extraordinary. For some reason, it reminded me of the tragedy of the Hindenburg in New Jersey back in the 30s.
And of course, the plane from Pennsylvania was reported to be a Chicago to New York flight. One of the ones earlier, we understand, was Boston to New York, the one that was hijacked.
Boston to L.A.
Boston to L.A. that was hijacked. Mm-hmm. And of course, all the information that we get, we're giving it to you, but of course, having to try and filter through so much of it.
Right. We have some eyewitnesses that we're going to take you to now. Let's just listen in.
What is happening? Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. Yes, I was right there. I was down in the basement. Came down. All of a sudden, the elevator blew up. Smoke. I dragged the guy out. His skin was hanging off, and I dragged him out, and I helped him out of to the ambulance.
Okay, we're seeing FBI, and again, that was an earlier recount. By the time, this man was still close, of course, to the World Trade Center building, but within hours, you could not be in that area because it was covered with smoke, and smoke inhalation is one of the major problems that many of the hospitals are seeing now.
50,000 people work in those two buildings in the World Trade Center. There were reports earlier of people jumping out of the windows, falling, obviously, so many stories.
110 stories.
Knocked one of the towers into the other, bringing them both down. That disaster was averted, and bad as that.
We are taking a look at CNN and some of their reporters. That's Jeff Greenfield talking with, I can't tell who that was for a second, but describing what's going on. And we are using some of their pictures. All of us in the media in the New York City area are having difficulties in our broadcast because the television towers that would broadcast to the region were on top of the World Trade Center. There was only one station that still maintained a tower, and that's where the old towers used to be, on top of the Empire State Building. And here's the collapse of that. So you can see the towers going down at that point. Those were the towers that, in fact, sent the signal to your home sets.
And of course, we all have our personal eye views this morning of how we found out. When I was driving into work, seeing people drive along the side of the road, looking up at what has become a New York landmark, being in such shock, they would veer off the road. Many would just pull off the road. Some even had their video cameras, and they would just pull off in shock, stop, and you could just see them weep.
Well, within an hour and a half, they closed certainly the tunnels into the city and the bridges. For a while, people were being allowed to get out of the city, and I believe that's still the case at the moment. For me in the morning, Brenda, what I was doing, I happened to be entered a new apartment that I had that overlooks downtown skyline, and I was on the phone with my wife when this happened. When the first explosion happened, I heard the explosion, looked out, and then saw the smoke coming from that first World Trade Center tower. And I said to her, "Oh my God, look at," I said to her, "the World Trade Center has just had an explosion." And she said, "Goodbye." And I called in here, as you did, and it just, the information in the news just kept developing into this unbelievable experience that this country has gone through. This is probably the first time a national terrorist has, organization, whoever that is, maybe Osama bin Laden or a collection of them, that has shut down the entire country.
Now, we're seeing pictures now here at the Pentagon. Of course, there were reports that the state capitol was under siege, and of course, as in any situation like this, there are so many rumors and reports, but that's what we try and filter out so that you get only the information we know about. You can see the pictures here. The incredible effort by firemen to try and get the building under control, but so many have also been evacuated, thank God.
That's a five-sided building, the Pentagon. It was built in 1941 through 43 to bring under one roof all the U.S. War Department offices, particularly during the Second World War. It was designed by a George Edwin Bergstrom, and I heard reports earlier and read some that part of it, and as you can see it there, part of that Pentagon building has collapsed.
And you mentioned Osama bin Laden earlier, and I do recall earlier reports, too, that the Secretary of State, of course, was taken away from the area. President Bush is in Florida. We do have the governor of New York, and the mayor of New York City, of course, in Manhattan. But in one of the quotes from one of the wire services, it says, only a very small handful of terror groups is on the list of being reported as second to none who could pull off something like this, if it is indeed terrorism. And at the top of that list is, of course, as you mentioned, Osama bin Laden.
Let's recap here for a quick second. Again, you're watching us on Comcast cable in New Jersey, Dish Network, DirecTV, because all of the broadcast properties and towers have been destroyed. We're on top of the World Trade Center. But just as a quick recap, today was a horrific sequence of destruction from terrorists. 2 planes crashed into the World Trade Center. The twin 110-story towers collapsed this morning. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon, as we've been telling you, and fear, Brenda, has certainly spread across the nation.
And we're looking at pictures now of our crews finally getting into New York City and seeing the kind of mayhem. This looks like one of the movies you see. It doesn't look real, but it is indeed real. Police trying to get people out of the area. Our reporters and photographers, of course, are always allowed into areas that are traditionally roped off by that yellow tape. But you're seeing the photographers obviously running away because they're being told this is not a safe area. No one knows what could happen next. And, of course, 2 other explosions that followed.
This looks like collateral damage from the World Trade Center that would be near that whole area downtown financial district. And obviously with the debris falling, fiery debris, explosions, it was a terrible scene and continues to be. You had a momentary flashback there for the Pentagon, but look at that.
Look at those people just dazed, trying to get out of the area. We see some sort of identification badge on the man. He could have worked for the World Trade Center or, with just a backpack. Apparently just regular people, pieces of people's clothing. Of course, trying to breathe in all that as well as this officer is trying to do.
It's not immediately known, and it probably won't be for some time, how many people have been killed this morning.
I think we aren't even ready to think about those kinds of numbers. This looks like the worst thing that has ever happened to us. We've reported on lots of things in the past, but never anything like this. And of course, as we also look at some of the other wire copy that we had gotten in, authorities went on alert very early on coast to coast. We're seeing more pictures come in. People, policemen obviously being hurt. Those people out there trying to help others are also being injured.
Yeah, they have put out a call for all off-duty firemen, all off-duty policemen, all off-duty emergency workers, medical personnel to report as soon as possible. Part of the difficulty, Brenda, as you mentioned earlier, is that the tunnels and bridges into New York City have been closed.
And looking at those pictures this morning to know that the towers no longer stand in New York City. Again, looking at the second plane that crashed into the World Trade Center towers this morning.
50,000 people work in those buildings. It is perhaps the most audacious terrorist attack that has ever taken place in the world.
And that's a quote from Chris Yates, an aviation expert at Jane's Transport in London.
You know, it takes a logistics operation from a terrorist group involved that's second to none to pull off something like this. Usually we, meaning the United States, has some kind of network of information that gets to you, and you get a warning, but apparently not today.
The pictures are just incredible. I mean, it's just unimaginable to have known that you saw the tower standing before and to see now and to see them just dissolve to rubble.
You know, President Bush, who was in Florida at the time of the attack, speaking to some school children, has ordered now a full-scale investigation to hunt down the folks who committed this act. Within several hours this morning, a helicopter crashed on a landing pad near the Pentagon. We're not sure whether that was part of the original explosion into the Pentagon or a secondary one as they were trying to cover the initial one.
Here's the president talking.
May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
March as he spoke to children this morning, and again, that was in Florida. And initially, his report and praying for the families and victims, initially, the Pentagon had not been hit at that time when he first spoke early this morning. He was not in Washington at the time, as we mentioned. He was in Florida. And it is just, this is the scene from the Hudson River.
That's extraordinary. There's the Statue of Liberty in the lower left of your picture. And you're looking directly toward the financial district in lower Manhattan. You know, authorities went on the alert from coast to coast. They halted all air traffic. They evacuated high-profile buildings. They tightened securities at strategic installations. The Situation Room at the White House in full operation. People were screaming, crying, running.
We've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
Frank Uciardo, one of our reporters, you've just listened to the president addressing a crowd in Florida this morning. And Frank Uciardo is now in lower Manhattan on the phone, live from the scene. Frank, what can you tell us?
Right now, we are just across from City Hall by taking refuge in the basement of a drugstore down here with a lot of emergency personnel who used this as sort of a little command center. Just after the second plane hit the building, we were actually just arriving on scene, and I was there with a cameraman, and we were looking upwards at the building, and then all of a sudden we started to see what looked like the top of the North Tower starting to collapse down towards the street. We were grabbed by police and we were running away from it with the police, the FBI agents, some ATF agents, just to get out of there because we thought we were going to be consumed by what was falling from the sky. And we took refuge in the basement of St. Peter's Church on Barclay Street, just about 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center there, and we were trapped inside. We could not get out. The scene outside was a complete white blizzard. You could not see out the windows of the church. It started to filter in and down into the basement of the church. So we had to leave the basement of the church, come back upstairs to try to breathe. We were putting rags over our mouths. It really became quite a situation. They were bringing people in by stretchers. In fact, we interviewed a person who was in the 10th floor of the World Trade Center tower when the first plane hit. He was a bank teller. He said he heard a large explosion, and he was knocked to the ground, and he was bloodied. And he was being evacuated when the second plane hit, and again he was on the ground, and he was lucky to get out alive. He was evacuated into the basement of the church building, and he stayed with us there for about an hour until the emergency people could get him out. But it is one of the most horrific scenes imaginable at the base of the World Trade Center. Right after the second plane, you would look around on the ground, and you would see bags would look like luggage. You'd see shoes, personal belongings strewn about the street with pieces of metal, machinery. You didn't know whether it was coming from the building or possibly it was luggage from an airplane. A lot of personal effects, papers, IDs, documents, and then this eerie shroud of white powder covering everything as it continued to come down from the top of the World Trade Center. Back to you.
All right, Frank, stay with us for just a second, can you, on this?
Yes, sir.
Is there a sense of panic at the moment, or are they trying to just gain control to figure out what to do next?
I've never seen anything like this in my 20 years in the business here. We have police and EMS. They're trying to get control of the situation because a lot of cell phone service is not working. The radios are going really crazy. So they're trying to communicate among a massive hysterical communication. And standing outside of City Hall, there you saw a lot of firemen and policemen. They were, and specifically the firemen. They were in the back of ambulances being treated. These were the first responders who responded to the first plane hit into the tower, who showed up, and they were caught when the second one was there. In fact, we talked to a firefighter who was in the back of one of the ambulances. He was a bit bloody, but he seemed to be okay. I mean, it was like they didn't know what had hit them, so they're trying to get their footing right now. A lot of the policemen and the firemen, they're trying to come into this particular drugstore to get supplies, gauzes, bandages from the drugstore, bringing them to treat people out in the street, taking water, whatever they can to scavenge from the inside of the drugstore to treat people out there on the scene because they simply do not have enough in their ambulances to take care of who's on the street right now.
Frank, I would imagine it's a triage situation, is it not?
They're trying to set up several different areas. They had one command post set up, but the situation is so enormous that they were originally had set up St. Vincent's hospital. As I was coming downtown after the first plane hit the tower, they were lined up in front of St. Vincent's Hospital with empty stretchers and doctors and nurses waiting the arrival of people from the first initial plane hit. And that was the first place that was set up as a triage and emergency center. But down here, they're still trying to figure out where they're going to place the main command post.
Frank, thank you so very much. Just please stay there and stay safe. We will get back with you in a few moments. But right now, we're going to go with some other interviews that we have from other victims. And we also need to let you know that the ferries are now being used to transport people across the river to New Jersey hospitals. Some more pictures of people trying to escape that mayhem this morning.
You can see one of the reporters there, you notice, with the microphone, also running, I heard one of the radio guys, one of our colleagues from CBS Radio, said they were running like crazy because of the smoke that was, and the debris that was starting to fall and crowd into the entire area.
Just incredible panic. You're seeing people on top of buildings, you're seeing bodies being falling off buildings. And reporters, as you know, that's the duty, is to get out there and to cover it. And Frank Uciardo mentioning they had to go from one place to another just to try and be safe themselves and get the information to everyone. And we do have some interviews coming down in just a moment, but as you can see, can you imagine just being there this morning and having to watch and be a part of that, trying to get the story out and just trying to, the police trying to get the situation under control?
It's the most extraordinary thing that I've witnessed in many of my years of covering news events and tragedies, not only here but in other countries. It's extraordinary.
And the mayor asking everyone to get out, especially everyone south of Canal Street. Let's listen.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. People jumping out. People just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And you could still see they were alive because they were flailing around.
Now, you know, 50,000 people, as we've been telling you, have worked in those Twin Towers. The first buildings of the towers opened up in 1970. The towers in the plaza, of course, were not completed until 1976. The last building completed in 1988. I can remember, Brenda, in 1976, as a reporter in this town, standing on top of the World Trade Center as they topped it out. It was a big ceremony. The mayor was there, the city officials, etc.
And, of course, as you can see, these people are emotional. Julia Chavez is going to talk to us now.
We arrived here at Newark Airport just a short time ago. The airport is at a standstill. As you know, the FAA shut down all takeoffs nationwide, so we have air passengers stranded out here as well as flight crews and workers. Nobody is allowed inside Newark Airport. There are people out here kind of just waiting around, not knowing what to do next. They're on their own. Now, I talked to a few people who are stranded here, some folks from Wales that just arrived this morning into Newark, and they were heading into Manhattan. They could not leave. They don't know what to do. People are just waiting to get out of here. I'm with Pat Enders right now. She was actually on Continental Airlines this morning waiting to depart from Newark, heading to Tampa. What do you think about all of this?
Oh, I think it's absolutely awful, and I'm so frightened. My family has dropped me off here this morning. I don't know how to get back to them, and I have no means of transportation, nothing. So I'm kind of scared. Thank you.
And that's basically the feeling around here at Newark Airport. Stranded passengers, people standing next to trucks, listening to the radio. Once again, all areas of the airport are closed off. I did talk to a few eyewitnesses who were inside the terminal when they saw two planes actually hit the World Trade Center, and they described it as a very shocking scene, as you can imagine, glass from a distance looking like sparkles shattering. And that's basically it. The planes are on the runway, not moving, and until we hear something from the FAA, we are just in that waiting mode along with these stranded passengers, crew, and workers here at Newark Airport.
You know, Judy, the FAA has, of course, shut down air traffic all over the nation, which, of course, affects all over the world.
Absolutely. We have passengers that were trying to head out of here to other parts of the United States as well as international flights. And, you know, there are folks here that were heading to the Dominican Republic. They don't even know what to do. I mean, basically they have their bags. If anybody checked in luggage, they don't have their baggage with them. I mean, everything is
just
it's eerie.
locked
It's
down,
a very
basically.
eerie situation.
All right, Judy.
Out here.
Thank you, Judy. We'll go back to you off and on.
Let me just ask her one more question.
Sure.
Judy, I heard someone earlier on one of the radio reports saying how when they first heard the announcement that there would be no flights, they assumed it was typical airport travel day. We know when things were delayed or they would eventually get out. What was the feeling of these people knowing that, no, they won't get out at all to go anywhere?
Well, the feeling is frustration, and I, sympathize with them. They don't know what to do. They had plans, some of them business, some of them pleasure, and they're stuck here. They are basically on their own. They don't know what to do. Everybody's kind of waiting around either for family to pick them up or to try to get out of here by bus or taxi.
Right, Judy, and I'm sure that in time, certainly, these folks will find their way in and out of the airport. and get back to their homes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But thank you for joining us, and
from Newark
we'll
Airport.
check back with you at Newark Airport at various times throughout this morning and this afternoon.
And of course, Frank Uciardo and so many other people, incredible people, are out there working hard to bring the information. And we're going to listen to some more witnesses in just a moment. But again, to recapture that incredible picture this morning, unimaginable, of a second plane going into the World Trade Center.
Let's listen in for a second.
Everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping. People got hurt, stuff went on top of them. And it was a big explosion, and everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow, this is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
And I look up, and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too. Standing in front of the Soho Grand Hotel, and the doorman, I went to firewall company, the doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion.
And we heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess, because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know. And I don't know, everybody just doesn't know where to go. They won't.
Okay.
Well, obviously, we're trying to show you some photos and some interviews, and sometimes we have to re-rack things on the air.
Right, of course. And let's talk about some of the things that are halted for just a moment. We know all air traffic coast to coast. The primaries in New York City, not today. Chicago Sears Tower closed down. International flights, of course, have been sent to either Canada or to other European countries. All Long Island Railroad traffic now ended. And, of course, no one can fly in or out. No one was allowed into Manhattan this morning. There were people originally being allowed out.
Let me give you some facts, too, about the World Trade Center towers. They're 1,350 feet tall. Each has 21 or had 21,800 windows, 104 elevators, an acre of rentable space per floor, 10 million square feet of office space. It was dedicated in 1973. It is owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It is the home of the commodity exchanges, 2 major investment firms, banks, law firms, a hotel, and an underground shopping mall. All of that apparently destroyed.
And some, what may seem minor at the moment, television watching as we know it is going to be changed for a while. When you talk about all the satellite dishes for all of the major local networks were on top of the World Trade Center. And of course, antennas atop there are no more. So therefore, that's one of the reasons you're seeing us now on Comcast of New Jersey, Dish Network, DirecTV. Television watching is going to change because that's why so many stations are off the air.
All right, we just heard that the plane that we were telling you earlier about that crashed near Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania, a Boeing 767, was out of Newark Airport heading to San Francisco.
And again,
again, Brenda, the tragic loss of life, and that was a United Airlines flight.
And again, to recount what the president had said, this is now a full-scale investigation. It was a terrorist attack, and to quote President Bush this morning, we will, quote, hunt down and find the folks who committed those acts.
You know, it seems that, Brenda, that what we're sensing here is that there's a coordinated attack by some terrorist organization against America, all across America. And this is something that is, as you just referred to, the president said that they will find and punish whoever is responsible. And I would imagine that finally this will be the impetus for all of the forces that we can muster, investigative as well as retaliatory, to find the people responsible for this and bring them to justice.
Exactly. And also, I think the one thing we haven't looked at, I mean, we are all in shock. So we've watched this morning. We want to get the reports on the air. But now it is time to think about casualties. Someone is beginning to estimate, and right now the estimate is casualties in the thousands.
It's got to be more than 50.
We just can't even begin to fathom.
It's hard to even guesstimate something like that.
We use the word horrible, and you hear it a lot, but this is indeed horrible this morning.
Finally, I think that the use of the word is appropriate. to what has happened, not only here at the Pentagon and the various planes that had crashed. The earlier plane that hit I guess it was the North Tower first, apparently was somebody said it was a small jet, not a large passenger jet, and that the plane was waving its wings as if in celebration. When pilots fly, Brenda, when you want to wave at somebody, or if you want to indicate something of pleasure, you would rock your wings to acknowledge, just to celebrate. And apparently this plane, the smaller jet that hit first about 8:45, was doing that as it plunged into the upper stories of the World Trade Center.
Reaction is now coming in from around the world. Let's first listen to PLO leader Yasser Arafat.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked. Completely shocked. Unbelievable.
We have...
Again, we're hearing that was PLO leader Yasser Arafat. Reaction coming in from around the world. And now back to New York City.
We have Barbara Nevitz-Taylor on the line at Broome Street. She's our reporter down there. Barbara, what do you have for us?
Rowan, I have been literally on the scene all morning. Shortly after the first explosion, I went down to the World Trade Towers. I live in Greenwich Village, and I walked down. I was at Berkeley and Greenwich, which is 1 block north of the World Trade Towers, where the World Trade Towers were, when we watched as parts of the building began to fall out. There were people 2 or 3 floors from the top of the building trying to wave for attention, trying to get help. There was a man at the west corner of the building waving a flag, and a helicopter came very close. This was after there had been 2 confirmed attacks, and I thought that it was a rescue helicopter. Optimistically, I thought it was a rescue helicopter. It may have been a 3rd attack, because at that point, police around me shouted, "Run, the building is collapsing." Well, actually, it wasn't collapsing, but a big chunk of the building at a lower point started to blow up, fell out, and the debris started raining on the street. People began at that point to run farther north. We got maybe 3 blocks away and looked back toward the building, and we noticed that people had begun to jump. First it was one person, then it was another, and we prayed that there wouldn't be any more. The people around me were groaning, "No, no, no," and then the bodies, people started flying from the windows. It was a choice of the flames, I guess, or jumping, and you didn't understand how this could be happening. It was really one of the worst things that I have ever seen. We started to move north, farther north yet again, and more debris was flying from the building. And as we got to about Worth Street, once again, I heard a police officer shout, "Oh no," and we looked back, and the North Tower of the World Trade Center was collapsing. In white smoke, dark smoke, sparkled. It was incredible. Again, people began to run for their lives because this debris was being showered all over the street. Rowan and Brenda, this has been a terrible, terrible morning. Every place I go, there are people who want to know if anybody got out of the buildings alive. People here in Lower Manhattan seem to have a friend or a relative, someone who has worked in the building, and they are desperately worried about them. But of course, we don't have those answers for them. We can only tell them to just please to be patient at this time.
You know,
Barbara,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brenda.
Just to remind people, too, of what is inside the World Trade Center. I mean, so many tourists see it from afar. We often travel and see, but who are those people that are in the building?
These are New
what kinds of
Yorkers.
businesses?
These are New Yorkers who are in the World Trade Towers. There are some government offices. There are New York offices. These are people who go to work every morning. The subway runs underneath the World Trade Towers and empties into a plaza. People come up from the boroughs, from Path, from New Jersey, from Metro North. They come to work. This was a working morning, and there were people going to work in the World Trade Towers. It was 5 to 9. the only thing we can hope is that the building wasn't full. But we do know that so many people have died, and it really is something that was awful to see.
Well, we're told, Barbara, that 50,000 people work in those two towers, and you can only assume the worst, not necessarily all. We were told earlier that were a few in the lower floors that after the first plane hit, they all ran, or some ran out and were taken to hospitals, and triage situation there.
Well, I'm actually here in Lower Manhattan with a young man who was very worried about his father. His father worked in the building and was in the elevator when the first attack occurred, and got down to the lower floor, and he is hoping that his father is at home right now. He said he talked to his father about 2 hours ago, and his father said that he was home. But so there are some people we do know who have gotten out, but it's been a terrifying morning for New Yorkers, and this was something that no one could ever imagine, or ever really want to see.
And of course, trying to get out to let someone know you're safe. We understand there were lines at pay telephones, 50 people deep, because of course no one could get out on a cell phone.
Well, all of the cell phones are jammed. I think that the law enforcement officials finally shut down the cell phones so that there is no cell phone access from here. I'm in a 7-Eleven, and I've borrowed somebody's phone, and they're being very kind to let me use the phone at this point. But its communications from Lower Manhattan are very dicey at this point.
Well, certainly all cellular traffic and use has been very difficult from that area. You know, you brought up a very good point, Barbara, and that is the fact that most of us will probably know somebody who knows somebody, certainly, who worked in that area, or who died, or who was injured or hurt in some capacity. The 6 degrees of separation is something that is very true. And with that many people, we'll all know somebody, probably personally, who experienced loss or injury.
Yes, Roland, that's correct. We are connected to each other by very thin strands, and when a life is interrupted, it really does affect many of us more than the immediate family. I think that anybody who has seen what happened this morning can never continue with their life in a way that they continued before. There will always be some fear.
You know, I think, Barbara, this is probably the first time in perhaps the history of our country, with the possible exception of the attack on Pearl Harbor, that we do not feel safe anymore. We are vulnerable.
And of course, to add to that, just to insert here, the borders have now been closed between the United States and Canada. The border has been shut down.
I must tell you, Brenda and Roland, that people are crying in the streets, and when I stop them to say, "Are you okay? Is there anything that we can do for you?" they say, "No, I am just terrified. I am just scared." These are people who are not necessarily connected by that 6 degree of separation, but feel the human connection. And for
I think we just lost
Barbara. I think we lost Barbara on there.
Of course, communication is so difficult, even as we mentioned with the television signals. The way you watch television, you will not be able to watch any station you want because the satellite dishes were atop the World Trade Center.
The towers themselves. So there's a difference between broadcasting and television. Mm-hmm. The broadcast signal is one that, by definition, it's broad. It goes out in a 360-degree radius, and you can tune it in with an antenna on your television set, rabbit ears or something like that. And then, of course, in recent years, you have now your cable systems. In fact, we are being seen on Comcast cable now, and that's why you're picking up our signal, because of the cable system. It's not broadcast. So broadcasting has become just television because of the satellite dishes, and we're also seen on Dish Network and on DirecTV.
Frank Uciardo, who first took refuge from the debris in a church, but now is across from City Hall. Our own reporter, Frank Uciardo. Now, Frank is on the line again. Frank, I understand you have someone who is a witness to what happened this morning.
Yeah. One of the many people who were actually working downtown here when this all started to happen earlier. I'm standing with a Mr. Hank Harvey. He is the building manager of 250 Broadway. Hank, exactly what did you see? Well, I was upstairs on one of the balconies watching the two towers burn, and the left tower, the south tower, I actually said to the guy standing next to me, who happens to be standing next to me right now, I'm worried about the integrity of the upper floors because of the damage. With that, I didn't have the words out of my mouth, and it came down. It was like something from TV when you see them implode the stadium, when they plan it started falling straight down, then it leaned to the east, and the next thing was a cloud of smoke. I ran downstairs.
to the next floor. Got all the people from my office. I said, let's get the hell out of here. That's Hank Harvey. He's the business manager of the building at 250 Broadway, which is right across from City Hall here. We're standing right at the corner of the Woolworth building right now. And as we look southward towards the World Trade Center, you can barely see a half a block, and all you can see is black and white smoke. You have about 20 fire trucks. It seems to be a staging area that is setting up right around City Hall here. And we understand that they're going to try to start to evacuate people who are being treated at the scene by the base of the World Trade Centers. They're going to try to walk them out of there because they can't get a lot of emergency vehicles down into that area because of a lot of the fallen debris.
All right, Frank, let me just interrupt you for a quick second here to tell you that what we're hearing now from the Associated Press is that thousands of Palestinians celebrated today's terror attack in the United States, chanting, "God is great," and distributing candy to passersby, even as their leader, Yasser Arafat, said that he was horrified. The U.S. government has become increasingly unpopular in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip because of this past year of Israeli-Palestinian fighting, with many Palestinians accusing Washington of siding with Israel. In the West Bank town, Brenda, of Nablus, about 3,000 people poured into the street shortly after the attacks were broadcast worldwide, and they were celebrating.
And just to recap, too, to give some people some sort of time frame, around 8:45, the first plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Around 9 o'clock was the second plane crash. Sometime later, the Pentagon was also attacked. And then, of course, we heard later, still in Pittsburgh, the United Airlines plane crashed, and that was north of Somerset County Airport. Now, that was a Boeing 757 en route from Newark to New Jersey to San Francisco. And
we have some tape, Brenda, of what we were talking about a minute ago, of Palestinians celebrating over in the Middle East.
And you're right, just as the PLO leader, Yasser Arafat, had come on declaring his sadness at this day, at what had happened in this country, and now to see signs of celebration.
It's a shame that children have smiles on their faces when they really don't understand the tragedy that has gone on, the number of lives that have been lost, and the repercussions that will affect not only their lives, but their children's lives as the world tries to understand this kind of hate.
And again, the entire world is watching the United States react to a situation that is just so unfamiliar to us. We're not used to walking the streets in fear. We're not used to having to run for our lives and debris falling down from buildings and bombs going off. That is just something we are unaccustomed to.
Now, we have felt safe in this country for a good many decades, and now I think for the first time, we're not going to feel safe anymore. And it will affect all of our lives because it will affect certainly air traffic and how with all of the security measures in place in various airports around the country, particularly Boston, where the American Airlines plane was that just you saw hit the World Trade Center there, where it was hijacked from. How did they get on board? How did they overpower the pilot? Did they have a pilot that flew it directly into that? I mean, there's just so many unanswered questions that will take literally months to sort out.
And of course, the emotions. We saw the earlier pictures of people walking around just in shock, disheveled, and of course, many of them, as Barbara described, seeing bodies, seeing people jump out of windows, seeing that kind of debris fall down upon people, seeing bodies. We mentioned one of the quotes came from the Associated Press. People were just in shock. The cloud of smoke, seeing bodies laying on the street, seeing clothes, bags, and papers. The terrorist attacks in Manhattan have so far shut down subway lines, crippled cellular phone service, forced the evacuations from Wall Street to the United Nations.
The mayor closed Lower Manhattan to make way for emergency vehicles. You know, thousands of people left by just walking across the Brooklyn Bridge or walking north of Canal. At one point, the mayor said, if you're south of Canal, walk, get out. The primary election, which was to be today, was called off. And as we've been telling you, airports closed, trading on Wall Street, that's suspended, the UN building evacuated. Offices throughout Manhattan closed, and children kept in schools because their parents could not get to them.
Of course, in other parts of the country, the Chicago Sears Tower closed down. It is just an
all in
incredible
anticipation.
day. Mm-hmm.
Air traffic throughout the United States, literally throughout the world. Planes coming into the United States have been diverted to Canada or were turned back to Europe.
And of course, to close the borders between the United States, the New York state line, and Canada, that border closed. The U.S. on a state of emergency. The president having been quoted as saying, we will get the people who are behind this terrorist attack.
You know, Barbara Nevins-Taylor told us a bit ago that she lives in Greenwich Village and walked down toward the World Trade Center as soon as she heard the explosion. We have her back on the phone now. Barbara, we're glad that you're safe. What do you see now? What can you report to us?
Right now, there's an eerie stillness in Lower Manhattan. People are walking north. The police have below Canal Street cordoned off, so it's impossible to get close to the towers. And really, I don't think anybody would want to, except to see if they know if there are any survivors. But it is very smoky north of Canal Street. It's very quiet. People are now walking rather than running as they had been just an hour ago, because that's when the buildings were still collapsing. And they're walking quietly, they're subdued. They can't believe that this has happened. And I think that really is incredibly significant, because most New Yorkers, most Americans believe that we are secure in our own beds. And literally, the World Trade Towers, while not being a bed, was part of our home life. It was an office to 50,000 people.
It also contains a hotel, Barbara.
That's true. That's true, Rowan. It also contains many shops, many fast food restaurants where people were undoubtedly having breakfast when the first plane hit. The
timing certainly was well planned. You figure 8:45 on a Tuesday morning?
Yep. You know that people have to be going to work, and it is maximum damage because people are coming into the towers through the subway systems that run underneath. And most people get to their desks by 9 o'clock.
And we wanted to tell you, too, just the United Airlines flight that was en route from Newark to San Francisco was flight number 93. We want to just get that information out as soon as possible to people.
I'm glad you're saying that, Brenda, because people are coming up to me in the street and asking which flight was it. Because once again, people have relatives who were on that plane. A young woman said, I think my dad was flying this morning. Do you know what plane it was?
Boeing 757 en route, Newark to San Francisco, and that was flight number 93. That's the one that crashed outside of Pittsburgh. That was not the
one that went
into
the World Trade Center, Barbara. That one apparently was hijacked out of Boston, and it was a flight that was going to Los Angeles, but diverted by the hijackers into the New York airspace and then into the World Trade Center.
Well, one of the things that we should talk about this morning is the response of the New York City Police Department on the ground. They were here very quickly. They were working with the FBI. I stood with them on the sidewalk. Unfortunately, many of them were watching as helplessly as I was, as we watched people jump from the building, as we watched what appeared to be a helicopter coming perilously close to the building. And I don't know if that helicopter ignited yet another fire in the World Trade Tower that precipitated a huge chunk of it dropping before about 45 minutes before the final collapse. But the police were confounded. They were mobilized very, very quickly. They were on the ground. They were trying to cordon off the area. They were very kind to people who were terrified and running away from the scene. But it was a situation where they were helpless to do anything about a building that was bombed 110 stories up.
And, of course, this is what they've all trained for. And there was one spokesman who was in Denver, for instance, with emergency preparedness officials who said, quote, I don't think there's any place in America right now that's not at risk.
Well, clearly, I think that's correct. If terrorists can so brazenly attack the symbols of our glory, our power, our pleasure, the World Trade Towers, they can hit any place in America, but this is something that obviously was an irresistible target. And one of the things that we have to remember is that the New York City Police Department and the New York City FBI have been training in terrorist drills and terrorist disasters for years. This is something that is literally their worst nightmare. You know, we use words like nightmare and horrible and horrific, but those words apply apply here. We overuse them in so many other situations, but this is the time when the words actually apply, when they're not cliches. But nonetheless, the law enforcement officials have been training for terrorist attacks, but I don't think that they could have anticipated the swiftness of these attacks, and certainly not the rapid succession. I heard the first explosion from my home, and then, instantly heard that there was an explosion at the World Trade Towers, then instantly heard that a plane had flown into the World Trade Tower. And then as I was getting ready to rush out, to go down as far as I could get to see what was actually going on, the second plane attack occurred. And I don't think anybody here on the ground could have anticipated that, even the most sophisticated law enforcement officials, and clearly they didn't.
Barbara, they've been training, as you suggested, for many, many years, ever since 1993, of course, and the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center at that time with the bomb down in the parking garage. And they've had all sorts...
I'm so sorry to cut you off, but another plane down. United Airlines Flight 175, Boston to L.A. Yet another plane has gone down. We just got that word in.
Oh, my God. Barbara, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. And once again, this is something that... Who could have anticipated the massive, widespread attack? I think that while law enforcement officials were preparing for attacks on New York, they were preparing for what they called the attacks on the signature buildings. The World Trade Towers were part of that signature group. But what they've done in Lower Manhattan is to literally make a bunker out of the federal courthouses, the federal detention center where a number of alleged and convicted Arab terrorists are being held, City Hall, the New York City Police Department. The ATF has an office in one of the buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The ATF is the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, which is responsible for investigating firearms and explosive disasters.
Barbara, let me interrupt you.
I'm sure there were people there who were at work. Now, their building is not their offices are not in the main tower.
Right, there's a lot of collateral damage, Barbara, but we have to cut you off for just a quick second here. But do stay with us, so we will continue to get reports from you from Lower Manhattan.
Precautions taken in various U.S. states in the wake of the terrorist attacks. One of the things I just wanted to mention, we were talking about a state of alert countrywide. Heightened security went into effect at government and corporate offices, at the Army's main germ warfare defense laboratory in Frederick, Maryland, city offices in Colorado, oil refineries in Louisiana.
When we have Frank Uciardo back on the phone with us, Brenda, with some New York City officials. Frank, go ahead.
That's right. I'm standing here right now just off Broadway by City Hall with Michael Hess, who is the city's corporation counsel. Mr. Hess, you were trapped in, I believe, 7 World Trade Center. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was. I was up in the emergency management center on the 23rd floor, and when all the power went out in the building, another gentleman and I walked down to the 8th floor where there was an explosion, and we've been trapped on the 8th floor with smoke, thick smoke all around us for about an hour and a half. But the New York Fire Department, as terrific as they are, just came and got us out.
Why did you happen to be at that particular place when the explosions took place?
Well, the Emergency Management Center is where city officials go when there is any emergency such as this one.
How do you feel that the OME, the Emergency Management, is going to be handling the situation? It seems like they're still trying to arrange triage areas and areas of command and setup. Where will they be now?
I don't know where the centers will be, but obviously the mayor and Commissioner Shira of OEM are watching the situation carefully, taking all the right moves, and everything's under control.
Where is the mayor located now?
I don't know myself. As I say, I was trapped in 7 World Trade Center for the last hour and a half.
Thank you very much. That's Michael Hess. He is the City Corporation Counsel who was trapped over by 7 World Trade Center. This is Frank Uciardo reporting live from Lower Broadway right down the block from City Hall.
All right, Frank, stay with us on the phone here for a quick second, if you would, please. I know you just finished talking with the city officials there. What else have you learned in the past half hour since we last talked with you about the mood, the feeling, the sense down there in Lower Manhattan?
There is a sense of surrealness. People are still not believing what they are seeing before their eyes, particularly among a lot of the emergency personnel, who are a lot of them who are first responders. They were just covered like in this white, thick soot dust, like it was baked onto them, They were dusting themselves off. They were being treated by other medics and paramedics. These were the people that first got down here before the second plane crashed into the other tower. So indeed, not only were the first responders people who were trying to help people who were trapped in the building, but many of themselves actually got caught when the second plane hit. So they had to be saved by other members of the services. So a lot of them were sitting on fire trucks, sitting in ambulances. They were stunned. They were grim. They were just shaking their heads. They did not believe what they had just beheld. And two police officers who were trapped after being trying to respond to the first incident said they just thank God that they were able to be extricated by some paramedics because they too were trapped. So it is a matter of the bravest being trapped along with all the other victims.
It is a time of shock. It is a time of worry for many. It is a time of fear, unfortunately. What you are seeing where we are broadcasting today, we are coming to you in many cases over Comcast cable, on Dish Network, and on DirecTV. You may or may not know that the television broadcast towers were situated on top of the World Trade Center, so many of the broadcast entities in New York City, with the exception of one that still remains on the Empire State Building, many of them will be off the air for a while until appropriate measures can be taken to move antennas, and I'm sure that's something that can be done with a matter of a few days to the Empire State Building so that people will get their broadcast again.
United Airlines says it's deeply concerned about a second flight, Boeing 767, headed from Boston to Los Angeles. That was flight number 175, United Airlines.
They're deeply concerned, meaning that it has been hijacked and nothing has happened as yet, or don't we know yet?
Down.
It is down. Now, is that the one I wonder that went down in Pennsylvania, or that's a different one?
No, that's a different one. There was flight 93 that went down in Pittsburgh. It was a Newark to San Francisco flight. The most recent is a United Airlines flight 175, Boston to L.A. That is the fourth plane. The two this morning at the World Trade Center, and of course the Pittsburgh one in Newark, and of course this recent one, United Airlines flight Boston to
So
L.A.
we basically have two Uniteds and two American Airlines that have gone down or at least crashed into the World Trade Center. You know, you look at the banner, Brenda, at the bottom of your screen here, America Under Attack. Never did any of us think that that would in fact happen on our home soil.
Okay. Mayor Giuliani spoke with New York One just a short while ago. Let's listen in. Okay, and of course he was talking about the incidents this morning. Of course, he is one of the first ones to be immediately put into one of those areas where they can monitor everything that's going on. Here's Mayor Giuliani.
Get out, walk, and walk slowly, carefully. There are plenty of police around, but just walk directly. If you can't figure out what else to do, just walk directly north. That'll get you out of the dangerous smoke area. It will also do us a big favor. It'll open up those streets because we're going to be moving a large number of ambulances and emergency personnel in and out of there all day. I've talked to the governor. He is putting the National Guard on alert so that they can relieve our police officers and our firefighters later this afternoon. And we've asked the federal government for help from the Urban Search and Rescue Team. So right now, we're using all of our police and firefighters and emergency personnel to help the people down there. Later on, we're probably going to need reinforcements.
Mayor Giuliani, I realize that it must be more than a chaotic situation, particularly since the bunker has been compromised and cordoned off. But can you give us any sense? There are so many people watching now who must have loved ones down in that area and are concerned of the systematic...
My heart goes out to them. I've never seen anything like this. I was there from shortly after it happened and saw people jumping out of the World Trade Center. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And all that I can tell them is that every resource that we have is attempting to rescue as many people as possible. And the end result is going to be some horrendous number of lives lost. I don't think we know yet. But right now, we have to just focus on saving as many people as possible.
Can you give us a sense of if there is, in fact, some system being implemented, what that system is, and where people are being taken?
People are triaging. People are being taken to every area hospital possible, even virtually within minutes. I drove down right past St. Vincent's Hospital, and I could see them actually on the street ready to take people, and that was within minutes of the first airplane hitting the World Trade Center. So the hospitals are ready. We'll be moving them to all different area hospitals, triaging them. The main thing is having those streets open so that we can get people in and out of the southern part of Manhattan as quickly as possible so that we can move them, to hospitals all over the city.
And Mayor Giuliani, we'll let you...
in place. They're doing it. We just need the cooperation of people in getting out of there.
We'll let you get back to the operations there, and we do appreciate you taking the time for us here.
But once again, the only thing to do now is to remain calm and try to assist in the rescue effort.
Thank you.
Now let's pray.
All of us.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
I think, Brenda, what the mayor just said there, and pray, is probably one of the more profound things that we ought to all do at this time with America under attack. We do have some more eyewitnesses as to what happened this morning. Let's take a look at that footage now.
After I got to the bridge, it happened like maybe 10 minutes after I got over the GW. And I'm like, man, it's crazy. I mean, everything looked calm.
And all of a sudden, I just kept driving, and I saw smoke both buildings. Once I got on the turnpike, I saw everybody parking on the side, so I did the same. And I was just watching because for me it was like a tremendous nightmare. I called my mother and my wife, and I said, there's going to be a war. I bet you there's going to be a war. And then all of a sudden, I see a lot of smoke, but I saw so much smoke, I couldn't believe it. And the first building collapsed.
Wow, I live right over there, and right in Kearny over there, and
Obviously, these are people, eyewitnesses who are on the Jersey side looking toward New York.
It's just incredible. We're sitting in the truck crying. I mean, incredible. Totally incredible.
It's too much to see that the terrorists can have a control on this country. It's a scary thing. We're only 15 minutes away from the city. You got to be, afraid to go back in there for a time to come until things settle down. Honestly.
Everybody's got cameras and driving like maniacs, and I think the whole world is petrified. I know I am.
There you go. I mean, eyewitnesses from the Jersey side looking over there. In fact, this morning, Brenda, I was on the phone overlooking I was on the Jersey side overlooking the downtown Manhattan area, and I turned away for just a moment, heard an explosion, went back to the window, looked out, and I saw the initial black plume of smoke at the World Trade Center. And then I said to my wife when I was on the phone with her at that moment, I said, wow, there's been an explosion at the World Trade Center. I've got to go. I'm going to call the office.
Colin Powell is on his way back from Peru. President Bush, as we understand, may still be in Florida. His is perhaps the only aircraft that is allowed on U.S. territory right now. All airports shut down. Of course, the New York primaries were canceled today. We have Alan Marcus, our political analyst, here with us now. But first, let's listen to President Bush, more comments that he made this morning in Florida when he found out about the terrorist attacks.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
The president was talking to some children in Florida this morning, and then we are told that he was heading back to Washington. Whether he's left yet or not, we don't know. What we do know is that perhaps as many as 5 aircraft were used in these attacks in various parts. 2 certainly into the World Trade Center.
Both those American Airlines flights.
And 2 United planes are apparently down.
And that was number 93, Newark to San Francisco, and number 175, Boston to L.A.
And there may have been another aircraft, either a helicopter or something, into the Pentagon, which caused that explosion.
Right, we just don't know about that one as yet. But Alan Marcus says there could be as many as 8.
There are news reports, Brenda, that there are as many as 8 planes that may have taken place in these various attacks. There are reports that, in fact, one plane south of Pittsburgh was possibly headed for Camp David, and there's another plane near Camp David that is already down. There's been a car bombing reported at the State Department. The White House has been evacuated. America certainly is under attack. It's not just in New York. It goes down to the nation's capital as well.
You know, under attack, you suggested earlier when we were chatting, I'm sorry, Brenda,
That's okay.
This is the first time that attacks have been successful.
Well, if you look at the World Trade Center bombing of 10 years ago, that was a successful attack. But after that, in the early days of the Clinton administration, there were efforts to blow up monuments, tunnels, other infrastructure in New York that were thwarted by the FBI and I guess the Central
All right, Alan,
Intelligence
let me break in for a second. We just had some video here of the plane crash in Pennsylvania, but apparently that's not it there. We'll get back to that as soon as we can. So continue your thought, please.
And at that time, the Clinton administration was praised for its ability to pick up terrorists, to follow them, and to thwart those efforts. Now, however, we see where there have been very, very well organized terrorist attacks against the World Trade Center, against the nation's capital, and we appear not to have a clue as to the origin of these attacks or how much more we can anticipate.
All of us just trying to make some sense of this. You as an analyst, we as reporters and journalists, citizens of this country, we will be trying to analyze this to figure out why, what happened, and what can we do to prevent it again.
Well, we look at it this way. September 11th is the anniversary of the peace accords, the Israeli-Arabic peace accords that were done at the White House under the Carter administration. There has been in the past the Black September movement, which hijacked planes and then blew them up in the middle of the Algerian desert. We have had car bombing attacks or truck bombing attacks on the World Trade Center, and now we have today. We have to recognize that we are no longer free of these kinds of attacks. This isn't like Pearl Harbor, where it was an imperial nation, a state where we could retaliate. These are people who are willing to give up their lives to make a point. We are being punished for something that is perceived. Possibly it's our support of Israel in the Middle East. Maybe it's other things. But we are without an enemy. So one of the things George Bush has to do right now is he has to regain the confidence of the American people. We have to look forward as a nation now and not be running off in many different directions. So as Ronald Reagan did after the Challenger disaster, he has to reassure the American people, he has to be a calming influence, and then he has to show that he's in command. Because right now there are a number of pundits around saying, would this have been tried if there had been a different president, if there hadn't been the disunity, if you will, political disunity in the United States, where control of the Senate changed, where there seems to be a lack of political direction at times, where we have been kind of at peace in the world and maybe we let our guard down just a bit. Think of it, 10 years ago, in the wake of the Gulf War, could 8 planes or 5 planes or how many planes it turns out to be have been hijacked on United States soil in one day?
We're going to now take a look at some tape that we have out of Pittsburgh. As we mentioned earlier, United Airlines had confirmed that 2 of their jets today were crashed. Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, Flight 175, Boston to L.A.
You know, Alan, when you talk about the political pundits each saying that looking for blame in some cases, and then you say we don't really have an imperial enemy to go after. What do we do? I mean, well, American people are going to demand something.
First, there's going to be the demand of how could this have happened? And then once we come to a conclusion of exactly what happened, there is going to be the retribution that has to be paid for. We remember the embassy bombings that took place a few years ago. President Clinton quickly responded to that. In fact, on the day after his appearance before a grand jury, some would question whether or not that was motivated, in fact, by his weakened political stand. And Brenda and I did a broadcast that night on that.
But Alan, when you talk about the kind of fear and grief that has gripped the nation within 3 hours in one day, the kind of fear and grief that we're going to be going through, not just within these 3 hours, not just the rest of today, but every time we look at our skyline and it's not there anymore.
Well, it's not there, and we always remember we woke up this morning safe and secure. And now it's midday. Nobody's going to lunch. nobody's safe, and nobody feels secure. America has undergone a metamorphosis, a change, and it'll never change back.
And to cut out television, to cut out television in this area, people from all over the country trying to contact each other, cell phone use, things we just took for granted.
Well, I've received many panic calls today from people saying, well, we just want to make sure you weren't at the World Trade Center, because that's the hub of business in the United States, and those of us here in the East, we spend a lot of time downtown. And my daughter called from Scottsdale, Arizona, in fact. My 5-year-old granddaughter called. She was worried watching it on television, I guess, as she was ready to go to school. And she remembered Pop took me there. Mm-hmm. And so there is that kind of worry that grips the country right now. I don't think there's any work being done in any offices. People are either in prayer, they're in awe as they sit in front of televisions, or they're just saying, what next? That's what you hear a lot of, Rowan and Brenda. What's next?
Well, that's certainly the president's decision as to how he places this attack and how his administration deals with it.
Well, he has to immediately get the confidence of the American people. He has to take command. He has to be in charge. We don't know where he is right now. We're presuming that Air Force One, as Brenda indicated, is probably the only plane that can fly over American soil right now, except for the F-16s that seem to be patrolling the skies over Washington and New York. We think we saw them from our windows. We're a little east of you, flying around.
And of course, you're afraid now every time you look up and do see any kind of aircraft.
We have people in our office that are just staring at the Empire State Building, wondering if it's next. I mean, that's what's taken over this country. The fear that grips right now. We have not had this kind of a direct frontal assault on our nation's capital probably since the British sacked Washington in 1812. It's been a long time.
Probably not.
And just to recap for just a moment, 8:45, the first plane hits the World Trade Center. Within 15 minutes, another plane goes into, as we saw in those earlier pictures, the World Trade Center. Then the Pentagon. Also, we don't know if that was a plane, but it's some kind of explosion at the Pentagon.
There are reports of a number of deaths, Brenda, that I heard on my way over, that there was a tail section spotted of what appeared to be an airliner in the wreckage at the Pentagon.
Correct.
Yet unconfirmed, I believe, but a number of deaths. The question is, with the loss of life at the Pentagon, depending on where that loss of life took place, is that our retaliatory staff that is no longer able to function? Where is our Congress? Where are our federal leaders? Who's in command here? Those are the questions that George Bush has to respond to right away, because this country has always looked to its leaders on a nonpartisan basis for leadership during these times of crisis.
Well, the Capitol was evacuated. The Senate House and office buildings were evacuated. Most of the major monuments were closed down. There is a plan, as you well know, in Washington, when something like this happens, that all of the federal officials who are needed in times of crisis are protected.
That's right. And they are not in the same place for fear that, as an example, when the president gives his State of the Union address, there's always one member of the cabinet who is left outside of the Capitol in case of a disaster of this type. So our form of government can continue.
Of course, we're always training for it. We always hear and see about the training exercises. We always think we are prepared for anything. Why do you think no one will seem to be prepared for this?
Because we've gotten lax. I grew up in the 50s and into the 60s, always presuming that there would be an atomic bomb dropped someplace on America. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen. We then went through a period of very aggressive terrorism. Probably capped by the World Trade Center bombing just in 93. In February 26th was my birthday of 93. And we've been
Alan, let me interrupt you for a quick second. There's moments ago, Senator Edward Kennedy and the First Lady Laura Bush spoke, and we have that video now for you.
Good morning. All of us deplore the acts of terrorism that we have seen in these past minutes, and our hearts reach out to all of those who have suffered, lost their lives, and are injured right now, and all of us reach out as Americans to the brave rescue workers that are attempting to help our fellow citizens. We, out of respect for those efforts, have postponed our hearing this morning. We underline the point that it is postponed. We are not going to see the business of America deferred because of terrorism, whether it's in education or in another area of public policy. We're looking forward to hearing from the First Lady on a subject matter which is of central concern to all families in this country, and because of her experience and her leadership, this committee and the Congress and the American people would have benefited greatly from her comments. And we will look forward to an early reappearance by the First Lady for this committee on the subject of early education. And Mrs. Bush, we recognize now.
You heard from the President this morning, and Senator Kennedy and Senator Gregg and I both join his statement in saying that our hearts and our prayers go out to the victims of this act of terrorism, and that our support goes to the rescue workers, and all of our prayers are with everyone there right now. Thank you.
You know, children are kind of struck by all this. Is there a message you could tell to the nation?
Well, parents need to reassure their children everywhere in our country that they're safe. Thank you.
All right, that's First Lady Laura Bush and Senator Ted Kennedy addressing basically the nation to try to reassure as it begin that process. Frank Uciardi Brundo is on the phone now in Lower Manhattan. Frank?
Yeah, Roland, things are extremely, as you imagine, tense and critical down here. We're at the corner of Park Place and Church Street. And just moments ago, as we got down here by Ground Zero, we looked up, which you could no longer see the World Trade Center towers from our perspective. There was nothing but skylight up there. It was a frightening, horrible scene. Police cars on fire, civilian cars on fire at the base there. And I was down there with a civilian by the name of Charles Romeo, who lives on Pearl Street. He's been our camera person down here. And as we were down there shooting the scene, we were attacked by the police officers who grabbed him and his camera and threw him up against the wall. Charles?
That's what happened. You know, we were trying to take some pictures of the scene. We were safe and taking some shots, and they were very upset that we were there, and they confiscated the camera.
And also, the firefighters who were there tried to dig stuff out of the rubble. They looked at us as if we were the enemy. They were shouting at us. They were threatening us with their axes, telling us that we had no place being there. But clearly, the horror of the situation. People are not reacting the way they normally would. The tempers are extremely tight here, and they're just trying to get a grasp on what is before them, which is really just desolation down here. It looks like a white moonscape strewn with papers on the street, smoking cars in the distance, and again you look up back to where you thought the World Trade Center towers were, and you can no longer see them.
Frank, such an incredible scene. How are you right now? What is it like being there, seeing this, and being a part of this tragedy?
It is a bit surreal. I thought after TWA 800 that I had seen and experienced just about everything. This is just one of the firefighters was screaming at us. Don't you understand? There's thousands of people that may be trapped or dead inside the building, referring to the World Trade Center towers. And that's, of course, as you realized just a little while ago, they evacuated the Corporation Council from number 7 World Trade Center, which was the bunker where these people go for the emergency management programs. In fact, I'm being asked by a member of the Bomb Squad, I understand, to use this phone because their cell phones are not working very well down here, and the Bomb Squad is asking to use the street phone. We're going to get off the line so he can make an emergency call.
Frank, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Cell phones all over the city are jammed because people are trying to find out what's happening to their loved ones.
And as Barbara mentioned earlier, they just cut off the service except for emergency use.
Governor Pataki has called out the National Guard, obviously to secure property and also to help, I imagine, in the rescue and recovery efforts.
Barbara Nevins-Taylor is now on the phone to update us on what she sees.
Brenda and Roland, police officers who are coming north from the scene are incredibly worried about their colleagues who were on the emergency response squad. The command bunker for the emergency response squad was in the World Trade Towers, and they think that as they assembled this morning to respond, many of the elite squad may have been killed.
I'm sorry, Barbara. Could you please just recap that, because it's very important. Members of the elite response
Well, we
squad.
don't know this for a fact, but this is a concern for police department on the ground. Right now, there is a lot of confusion, and I certainly don't want to add to it, but we must understand, if you remember from the Y2K planning, the mayor's emergency bunker was in the World Trade Towers, and that's where the emergency response team is headquartered. That's where the command post is. So the first team that was assembled to respond to the first plane attack was in the World Trade Tower. And now the police officers who are on the street are concerned about the well-being and the safety of those elite officers who are trained to respond in a situation like this. But there is such widespread concern about everyone who is in the building, not only about these police officers, but about relatives or friends who might have been in the police in the building, near the police officers, or any place in the building. I'm here with a woman who is trying to locate her husband, who was on the 65th floor. He went to work in a bank this morning and went up to the 65th floor. She knew, and she was afraid that he might not have gotten out.
Barbara, thank you so much.
You know, Barbara, we'll be getting back to you, certainly. We have Dave Barker, who is also in Lower Manhattan. Dave is one of our reporters here at UPN9. And Dave, what's your assessment of the situation at the moment? Dave Barker, we've established contact with you now in Lower Manhattan. What is your assessment of the situation now?
We're only about 6 blocks from the point of the explosion. And in front of me, I know you've heard this from everyone this morning, but words just don't adequately describe what I'm watching right now. Just this thick, black, intense, boiling cloud of ash enveloping this area of Manhattan. All around me, there are people just in utter disbelief. The only sounds here, just a cacophony of ambulances, police, and emergencies crews screaming to the scene here. In the air here, just a constant dusting of ash all over for miles here in this area of Manhattan. Almost looks like a light dusting of snow. And again, on the faces of everyone, just disbelief. I spoke with one NYPD officer just a few moments ago, and he said he saw the Twin Towers go up, and then this morning he watched them come down, and then he just choked up. There were no more words. At every major intersection here, people in large groups are just sitting here in disbelief, listening to radios, trying to get the latest words and trying to make some sense out of what they see with their eyes right in front of them. Again, the ash covers every street in this area, every car. I spoke with a news crew earlier who was in there for the second blast and was lucky to get out with their life. And again, they weren't talking. It was almost as if they were in shock. Right now, everything south of Duane Street, no one is allowed in. That even includes our crews at this point. They're just worried about. They said there's more explosions going on as we speak. There's talk of gas leaks on the west side, possibly near the Chelsea Pier areas. There's just everything at this point is unsettled.
Dave Barker in Lower Manhattan. Thank you so much, Dave. Earlier, we saw people parading around with smiles on their faces in one part of the country. PLO leader Yasser Arafat has issued a second statement, and I guess this comes after there was some joy, even though he was expressing sadness.
And we have that video now.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked.
Of course, he was not reacting after we had seen earlier shots of the people actually celebrating.
What you're referring to is on the West Bank and elsewhere in the Middle East, some of the Palestinian children as well as adults, women, were handing out candy in the streets, celebrating the fact that there wasn't a successful attack on America, both the Pentagon, at the Pentagon and also the World Trade Center. What we're looking at now, Brenda, is the evacuation at the White House, purely as a precautionary measure. But certainly, if you have an aircraft the size of a 767, I think it was, that hit the Pentagon, at least that's the presumption at the moment, guided into that as a suicide plane, then you would take precautions and evacuate all of the major federal buildings in Washington.
And of course, when it comes to those airlines, just to recap for you, American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to L.A., crashed into the World Trade Center. The plane was carrying 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. Then the American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles Airport near Washington to Los Angeles, crashed into the World Trade Center. That plane was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. And then 2 flights from United Airlines. Flight number 93, a Boeing 757, crashed southeast of Pittsburgh from Newark to San Francisco. The plane was carrying 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. And the last one, United Airlines Flight 175, bound from Boston to Los Angeles, carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots, and 7 flight attendants. And we're seeing scenes right now.
The text now of the statement issued by American Airlines reads that American Airlines confirmed that it has lost 2 aircraft in tragic accidents this morning. American said the flights were, as you just reported, Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route from Boston to L.A. with 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots, and Flight 77, a Boeing 757 operating from Washington Dulles to L.A. with 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. They went on to say that because of the heightened security due to the nature of today's events, American said it is working closely with the U.S. government authorities and will not release more information at this time.
And of course, the government has shut down the entire traffic system. And American Airlines, by the way, has given this phone number for information. If you have loved ones or need information, please call 1-800-245-0999. We would understandably think that no one who just needs flight information would be calling that number, but this is just for people who may have lost relatives, who need more information about concerned loved ones. 1-800-245-0999 from American Airlines.
You know, also, Brenda, just as a quick thing to let people know, all major baseball games have been canceled throughout America today. Joining us in our studio is Tom Phelan, criminal and civil investigations, international affairs author. Tom, under the circumstances, thank you for being here, but did you ever expect anything of this caliber, this nature, this magnitude?
I had been security for Nomura Securities at number 1 Financial Center. Excuse me. And I warned them. I had been overseas. We set up an Athens base where we interviewed various people. We were doing business with Greece. We were doing business with Iran, Iraq, and our part of the job over there was to interview people and ask them what they thought of the United States. They said that they thought the United States was like a big fat kid with a big mouth that was afraid to fight. That's what they said. And when
these are everyday people.
Yes, these are people in the street. No, plus higher ups. We were doing business with the people connected with the premier of Greece and people connected with higher groups.
Well, you said you warned them. You warned them of what?
I warned Nomura Security. See, I had been their security and bodyguard for the president of Nomura Securities. I had been going down checking the security, coming in and out of World Trade Center and number 1 Financial Center, and I thought it was pretty weak. And I told them that that's what it was. And considering what the way the Arabs think, especially those who are very religious, that they're going to die and go to heaven, and these people are very, well, you can say, exceptionally the macho type, violent people when they get mad. They're very violent. I went and I told them, I said, I was in the Marine Corps, and in the Marine Corps we checked everybody coming in out of the gate, that kind of thing, Marine Security Police. And I thought that this should have been done here at the Financial and the World Trade Center. So I went upstairs and I told the people in charge of Nomura Securities that they should tighten up the security at the garage area where these vans are coming in and out and trucks are coming in and out to check them more closely. And I felt that it would be easy for them to build. I had in my mind a large explosion for a building like that. So I had in my mind a large explosion. So what came to me was these small A-bombs that the kids have built that have gone to college, and they have built these small A-bombs. Well, this is what I had in mind, that they would be in a warehouse, put the A-bomb in a van, and drive it under the World Trade Center, all the Nomura securities under the financial.
When did you have this discussion with these
That was
people?
just before the explosion at the World Financial.
Today? Just before, I mean, in 93?
I told them this before the explosion in 93.
Oh, okay.
I was there working
Well, what about now?
Well, I knew this was going to happen. I felt that this would happen. I think it's all our enemies over there, Iran, Iraq, and Libya, and the bin Laden in Afghanistan, are all in on this.
But did you ever think it'd be planes? Did you ever think that airplanes would strike World Trade or and other places in the country?
Well, I thought that they would do kamikaze things on us, but I thought, after the first time, I thought, well, if they don't succeed, what they're going to do is they're going to do it sooner or later, worse than that. But my guy went back to Tokyo that I had been bodyguarding, and then my job was over. And right after I left, then the World Trade Center blew up. They had that horrible explosion down there.
When you first heard this morning, what were your thoughts?
You know, it's really funny. I was kind of shocked and kind of expected something to happen down there, but not that devastating. So I became angry. First of all, being a Marine, and when they killed the first 250 Marines over there in Beirut, I felt that we should have went and follow Israel and the way they do things. And when somebody does something to you, you go out and get them and do something to them. That's the way the United States used to be years ago, where if anyone an American or people that were threatened, their lives were threatened or anything like that overseas or something, you send the Marines over and get them out, things like that. You go and you have to be tough. The terrorists, you cannot talk to them. They already have it in their mind that we are the devils, that we are the evil ones, that they are the good people, and when they die, they're going to go to heaven. You cannot talk to them. You have to show strength. They don't believe in anything but strength and power over there. Even in their sales over there, you have to show power.
Tom, stay with us for a couple more minutes, if you will. Now we're going to go to a videotape that we had, a conversation that Mayor Giuliani has had with some reporters that we have been listening to. And as we prepare that tape, we will bring it to you in just a moment. In fact, it's ready now. Let's take a look at that.
Going on right now, we're trying to evacuate thousands and thousands of people. We have as many of our police and fire personnel as we have down in the southern part of Manhattan, evacuating people, trying to save as many lives as possible. We've been in communication with Governor Pataki, who's gotten the National Guard ready, and they're going to come in and relieve us a little bit later in the day. And we've spoken to the White House, and the urban search and rescue teams will come here also to assist us. But right now, it's the New York City Police and Fire, EMS, that are down there trying to evacuate as many people as we possibly can. And we've asked everyone to leave Lower Manhattan if they can on their own so that it relieves our efforts. And this will be going on all day. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy.
It is that. Mr. Mayor, can you tell me, is it are people panicking down there? Or
no, people, I was there right in a building that got hit by the debris when the first tower collapsed. So I had to evacuate with people, and we were trapped in the building for a while. And we finally were able to get out, and we all walked north. And people, everything that I observed, even though it was hundreds, maybe in some cases thousands of people that were walking on the street, they were orderly, they were calm, they handled themselves really probably better than anybody had any right to expect.
And Mr. Mayor, we were told one of the problems, and Lord knows there are hundreds of problems, one of the problems was that a large number of police, fire, EMS personnel have also been injured in this. Can you shed any light on that?
I don't even want to contemplate what the number will be. But when the building collapsed, we had a lot of our police officers and firefighters in the building, and I know many of them because I saw some of them go in because I was there, and I'm praying for them. I just hope they're able to get out.
I think we all
the losses to our police department and fire department
Sir,
believe are going to be severe.
Do you believe that was there another set of explosions that caused the buildings to collapse, or was it the structural damage caused by the plane?
I don't know. I saw the first collapse and heard the second because I was in a building when the second took place. I think it was structural, but I cannot be sure.
And can you tell us how many hospitals in the city and perhaps outside the city too? All of them.
Right now, at last count, we were utilizing over 50. I think it'll be over 100 and that was as of a half hour ago.
And
we're utilizing all of the hospitals in New York City. We're utilizing the hospitals in Westchester and Rockland, Nassau County, northern New Jersey. And the main thing we have to urge people to do is to be calm and evacuate lower Manhattan. And as far as the rest of the city is concerned, just to go about their lives as best as possible. I never thought I would see something like this happen. I got there after the first plane hit and before the second, and watching people jump from the top of the World Trade Center is an unbelievable sight.
Mr. Mayor, my colleague Jeff Greenfield is with us also. Jeff?
Mr. Mayor, in terms of, you've already said that you want lower Manhattan evacuated, you want everybody else to go about their business. Are there specific instructions that you want to communicate right now to police, fire, everybody else?
Well, the police and fire are there, and they're there in large numbers, and they are, first of all, trying to get into the rubble and the debris to save as many people as possible. We also have thousands of police officers in lower Manhattan, and what we want people to do is to leave lower Manhattan if they can on their own. Just to walk. Sorry. Walk. I just talked to Dick Grasso, who runs the stock exchange, and we have a lot of police there. They have 3,000 people there. We're going to walk them out. We're walking them east and then north, which is essentially the way I walked out. I was right below the World Trade Center when it collapsed, and then we walked up to Greenwich Village. People should walk out of lower Manhattan, get above Canal Street, for safety reasons, but for a second reason. We need people out of there so we can get thousands of ambulances in and out over the course of the next couple hours. And the fewer people we have there, the more lives we're going to be able to save.
Mr. Mayor, are the subways operating?
The subways are operating outside of Manhattan. Outside of Manhattan, the subways are operating. A couple of delays here and there, but in all other four boroughs, the subways are operating. In Manhattan, there are significant delays. We thought we had the Lexington Avenue open, but it is not. I'm just checking right now. The Lexington Avenue is not open. The A train is working, and people will just have to test and see. The best thing to do right now is to walk. The safest and best thing to do is to walk to your destination. Where schools have remained open, and we've worked with the chancellor to try to make certain that the schools will remain open for as long as they have to help parents with the kids that would be coming home, starting at around 1 or 2 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor.
Emergency Command Center, what some people have called a bunker, was located, was it not, in one of the World Trade Center buildings?
It was located close enough to it so that it was affected by it. It's not in one of the buildings, but it was located right in that area, as is City Hall, the police department, and all of them had to be evacuated. So that area of Manhattan, once I was in a building at the time that we were using as a command center, and we were trapped in the building for a while, for about 20 minutes, not able to get out different exits that were overcome with smoke and debris.
Mr. Mayor, just as a practical question, do hospitals need help? Do they need
hospitals need all of the help they can get. We're getting a great deal of help from the surrounding areas. The governor has mobilized the state in order to make hospitals available to us outside of Manhattan. Any hospital personnel or emergency personnel that want to come in and volunteer, that'd be enormously helpful. But the best thing for us to do right now, and we're trying to coordinate, is to move people out of the city to hospitals in surrounding areas, which we're actually doing now. But so far, though, our hospital system we're very fortunate to have a gigantic hospital system.
Do they have enough blood? Do they need blood? Do they need people to come in and help them out?
I'm sure they will. We're getting the National Guard to relieve our people by early to late this afternoon. They're being mobilized now. And 3 urban search and rescue teams are going to come to New York City to help us. And then anyone that wants to volunteer from surrounding areas, volunteer fire departments and others, we're working with them now to do that, to try to relieve our fire department.
It's a horrific day, Mr. Mayor.
There's no possible way to begin to describe it.
No, there is not.
To see what happened there is, of course, it makes you very, very angry. It's almost impossible to describe the level of anger that you have that somebody or someone would do something like this. And all of the good and wonderful people that were affected by this. There's no reason for this. There's no excuse for this. And there's something like this. It's just something you never thought you would live to see.
I couldn't agree more, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani on what was to be an election day. The mayor.
Okay, that was Mayor Giuliani discussing what happened this morning and how New York is coping, and as if the horror could not get worse. Now we have unconfirmed reports.
Well, Brenda, we have unconfirmed reports that there was a cell phone call made from the plane that crashed into the World Trade Center that you're seeing right there, just before it happened. The cell phone caller apparently said that panic was on board the plane, that people were being stabbed. That's all we have at the moment. That's all we heard, but UPN9 News has, that was reported to us, and we have it on reliable authority that that's an accurate statement.
And right now there are still 50 commercial airplanes over airspace in the U.S. that were apparently already there before 9:30 when the FAA called off and said all airports should be shut down, and at 9:40 bridges and tunnels should be shut down. But right now there are still 50 commercial airplanes over airspace that need to get to someplace safely.
And we said earlier that they were being diverted to Canada.
Exactly.
And the ones coming in from Europe were being told to go back to Europe because aircraft travel throughout the United States has stopped by the FAA and for the foreseeable time.
Exactly.
We have Logan Crawford, who is live with us down in Jersey City, which is across the bay from Lower Manhattan. Logan, it's the pictures there are just telling, aren't they?
Absolutely, Roland. This is a section of Liberty State Park where you usually have an awesome view of the World Trade Center, but instead this is what you see, just a large cloud of black and gray smoke. What used to be the World Trade Center, what used to be perhaps the most distinctive aspect of the New York City skyline is just gone. As I was driving here from Secaucus, heading to Jersey City to meet our satellite truck, we kept on saying, let's get closer so we could see the World Trade Center. But as we got closer, we realized there is no more World Trade Center. Now, joining me live now is Stacy Colavito. She was in the heart of all this. She works at number 2 World Financial. And Stacy, you showed up for work after the first plane crashed into the World Trade Center. Tell me what you saw after that.
After that, pretty much we were all at the window and watching people kind of, I don't know whether they were jumping or what. And following that, we saw a passenger plane come into the World Trade and a huge explosion, and then we obviously evacuated. We were evacuated in front of the World Trade, to which it was horrific, and saw many people jumping out, and there were bodies, and there were, I don't want to get graphic or upset, but...
Stacy, tell me, when you saw the World Trade Center on fire after the first plane collided into it, what was going through your heart? What was going through your head?
I think probably my biggest concern was for friends and colleagues that I knew that were working in there, families and friends that were panicked watching all of this, and us having no way to communicate with the outside world, cell phones not working, phones not working, and just pure, I don't know, terror.
Then when the other plane crashed into it, it must have just been unbelievable.
It definitely didn't seem real. There was a lot of screaming, a lot of us crying, obviously, and just seeing that sight, what I'm describing, was just, it was panic, utter panic.
What floor were you on?
I was on the 11th floor of 2 World Financial.
How did you get down?
The stairs.
Tell me what it was like on the street once you got downstairs.
On the street, it was pretty much just worse at that point because there was a lot of debris and there was a lot of fire. There was a lot of emergency vehicles, a lot of people screaming and crying, a lot of people very, very hurt, clearly very hurt.
Stacey Calavito, thank you very, very much for your account. I'm glad that you're okay. I'm glad that you're here to talk with us live. Again, we're live at Liberty State Park in Jersey City, a section of park where you usually have a spectacular view of the World Trade Center, but today we only see a large cloud of smoke. We're live in Jersey City. Logan Crawford, UPN9 News. Roland, Brenda, back to you.
Logan, thank you. A view that's changed forever, that is no more.
Never have I seen, or have any of us seen, destruction and devastation like that from an concerted act of terrorism from groups or people unknown and known.
Robert Schumacher was there. He was in Building 2 this morning. Let's first listen in to CNN, though, and the latest that they have.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has already explicitly said its standpoint or its position about terrorism.
This is a news conference that we're picking up from CNN, from the Taliban news conference, talking about the attack here.
We have criticized all forms of criticism as Afghanistan has itself faced and has become the victim of terrorism, and we are now criticizing on the fact. Terrorism, terrorism is a terrifying and hateful hatred or hateful method. And this incident is, from the humanitarian point of view, surely a very vast and very terrifying incident. Any questions? Any questions?
Please. Have you received any kind of information, any kind of communication from the United States or any other organization?
نه تر اوسه پورې چا کومه رابطه نه ده کړې او اوس تر ټولو مهمه خبره ده چې هغوی په ژغورنه باندې اخته دي کېدای شي چې یوازې هغوی ته د تسلیت پیغامونه تللي وي او دا چې اسلامي امارت سره چا تماس نیولی دا خبره تر اوسه پورې نه no contact up to now. They might be busy, or surely they are busy in the rescue operation. So they need confidence, but up to now, no communication from him.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks from the United States?
Taliban في مرحلة واحدة from the Taliban حملة موږ د تروریزم ټول انواع همیشه غندلې د پخوا څخه په دې باره کې پالیسي شته. Our policy was very clear from the very beginning, and we have criticized, and even now we criticize terrorism in all its forms.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden لاسله هیڅ قسم د کوم یو قسم د لاسله لیدنه تسکري راکړل. تر اوسه پورې چې هغه باندې رسمي تور هم نه دی لګولې. No, up to now, no one has blamed or accused him formally.
The Taliban have said that they will maintain Mr. bin Laden without communication, unable to communicate. Can you be convinced at this time that your policy of keeping him without communication has been effective in recent months?
طالبان ژمنه کړې چې اسامه بن لادن سره به هر قسم اتصالاتي امکانات بدلون لري. تاسو دا خبره تاییدوئ چې اوس هم هغه پالیسي کې باندې عملي ده؟ موږ په پالیسي کې تغیر نه راغلی دی. No change in our policy in this regard.
Do you think the policy is working?
او دا پالیسي کار هم کوي؟ اثر یې کړی ده؟ دې خبره ده.
Suspicions obviously turn to Osama bin Laden. In the media, he's been mentioned as possibly having a hand in this. Are you concerned that Afghanistan could be on the receiving end of recriminations of reprisals of responding back?
توجه یا ګمان ته راوړي مطبوعاتو یا میډیا کې د منهم اخیسته ده او تدریس د حقوقي چې افغانستان باندې د اسلام غوښتي د اسلام هدف وګوري
فکر کوم چې دا غنوم اخته هم یوازې به د فقاهه چې په هغه تفسیرو کې ډېر نوم راځي اسلام خاصوي
I think that even if someone has taken his name in the media, it might be just because his name was repeatedly mentioned in the past in the comments. Just for this reason, his name might have been repeated.
Just the second half of the question, though, are you concerned that Afghanistan could receive reprised attacks?
We don't see or foresee any difficulty in this regard because there is no argument or no reason for it.
If it were to happen, if there were to be attacks, what would the implications be of such a situation?
If there were attacks from...
As Jonathan said, if there were to be reprisals against Afghanistan, what would the implications of that be?
هغه به دا وخت ګورو خو ما مخکې ټول انواع توریزم هغه په دولتي شکل باندې چې یو هیواد بل هیواد ولې طبعا هغه دولتي توریزم
It is a little bit earlier to say at this stage, but as we said that we criticize all forms of criticism. So if Afghanistan is attacked, then we can call it state terrorism.
There's also been concerns expressed about Arab mercenary fighters in Afghanistan and allegations that there's maybe an Arab connection. These acts of terrorism have also been raised. Can you talk to those concerns? Can you rule out any Arab links?
Afghanistan की अरबी अखबार या बाज़ वसी ग्रुपों से वहाँ दुनिया खतर ऐसा सभी تفصیلی حقوق یا سلوگان پولیسی که هم ردوی
زه فکر کوم چې دا پیښه ډېره لویه پیښه ده او دا به داسې چا پسې مسؤل چې زړه ته مو نه لګېږي چې دا کار وکړي دا به کېدای شي چې یو ناانصافي وي یو کوم تصمیم ونیسي
It is a very big and enormous incident. So just to connect it with some people that even one's logic cannot even accept it. So in my opinion, it might not be a justified.
Mr. McGill, are you surprised that the United States has received this sort of attack?
بأمريكا متحدة الولايات شديدة حملات هدفه لتكاتب مهران سياسي.
د دې خبر ده چې د خپل نوې دا پیښه کېدای شي د امریکا په تاریخ کې ډېره لویه پیښه وي د هر چا لپاره طبیعي خبر د حیرانۍ وړ ده
Naturally, because this might be the only and the unique kind of incident in the history of the United States. So, like anyone is also...
What I'm getting at is...
You're listening to a news conference in Afghanistan, the Taliban ruling authorities. That's the foreign minister, Mutawakil. And he has been answering questions regarding their connection, if any, to this terrorist attack on the Pentagon and the World Trade Center today. He basically has denied any responsibility. He's been asked about the Osama bin Laden, who is basically been given sanctuary in Afghanistan for a number of years, and whether they had any knowledge of his responsibility for this or this attack or anything else for that matter. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand the translator, but that's in essence what has been going on in Kabul, Afghanistan.
And back home, Robert Schumacher was in Building 2 of the World Trade Center this morning when the first plane went into the World Trade Center. Robert's on the line now. Robert, what happened? What were you being told?
Well, when the first plane hit building number 1, we heard the explosion, and some people said, look what happened. And, we looked out the window and saw building 1 on fire. And unfortunately, for whatever reasons, the emergency intercom came on and said a plane hit building number 1. There's no cause for alarm in this building. We should all remain in the building. And some people were smart enough to have left right away at that point, but unfortunately I didn't. I believed what they told me on the intercom. And then sometime later, there was a huge explosion in my building. And at that point, of course, we all left.
You were able to get down? Was there so much smoke, noise, what?
There was some smoke on my floor and some smoke in the stairway, but not that much. The stairways were crowded, but it did move. And the smoke wasn't that bad that it caused me any problems. You could just smell it, but it didn't really cause me any breathing problems.
You were basically halfway up the building, is that correct, Robert?
I was on the 58th floor, facing north.
Robert, we wonder if there was panic when you see those faces on the street. Did you see hurt people?
I heard people yelling that people were jumping out of building number 1. I saw the bodies in the streets. I saw people hurt. When of those leaving, there were people that were burned. I could see that they had evacuated. It was just horrible. But like I said, I'm the most upset that they told us to stay in the building. That they didn't tell us to leave right away. They could have killed me by telling me to stay in the building. But that's what they said. That there's nothing to be concerned about. The building number 1 had a plane hit it, and we were in no danger.
How long did it take you, Robert, to walk from the 58th floor to exit the building?
I'm not quite sure. Because the last thing I was thinking about was my watch at that moment. But I can tell you that it was a very orderly evacuation. There wasn't any panic, at least that I saw. And we were able to get it was fairly smooth. And we got out of the building and onto the street. And, we're told to get away from the area.
Did you ever rehearse any of this? Were there ever drills that to evacuate this building?
The only drills they ever had were fire drills in which they gathered in the hallway near the exit door, so we would know where the exit doors were, but we never actually walked down any stairs as part of any drill.
When you got outside, can you describe what you saw there, please?
I saw both buildings on fire, and I could hardly believe it. How bad it was in my building. Because building number 1 I could see already from the window, but I could hardly believe how bad my building was. And like I said, all I could think of was they told me to stay in the building, a few minutes earlier. It was just engulfed in flames.